Joanne got the long version, and then this morning when I get here, I asked him to shorten it up a bit. So we'll come back to and finish up chapter 21, at least a chunk of it, at least next week, and it sort of ties in with this story because it's really a part of it, but I thought we would keep it under control this morning. So after Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them, and they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize it was Jesus. And he called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. And he said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish. For they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire burning coals, where there were fish on it, and some bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat, and he dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave some of it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus had appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. So as we sort of referred to, and a lot of you know that Renee and I were gone last week. We were in Reno, Nevada. I'm trying to make sure I say it right. I'll learn to say it their way, I guess. I was reminded when I got out there, I remembered things about when we lived in Denver, Colorado. You get pretty bored pretty quick. The color spectrum in nature out there is pretty flat. There's a lot of tans and grays, and the trees are green, but they're a very dark green. And so it doesn't take very long, or it didn't take me long, to sort of miss the colors and the things that we have going on here. In fact, it was still cool enough out there that it wasn't even really a growth season. And so it was still, well, if you didn't go just a few miles, you could climb into the mountains, and there was still snow stacked up on the side of the road. So it even snowed when we were there out on a boat trip. So it's, the variation of weather during the day would be 65 to 75, and then at night it would get into the 30s. So there are a lot of things that I remembered I like about here. Now, come midsummer, I might appreciate the dry heat, but when we were out there, it wasn't exactly. Everything wasn't perfect. Although we were staying in this resort complex and casino, so it's the same thing, I guess, out there. But so we were there, and I looked out as from one of these windows. There was a real color, and I said, "Man, those palm trees look great." And you look out another way, and there's just the lawns around the edge of the area they were really green. And when we went out for a walk to go to a restaurant outside of the complex, I actually had to walk across the green. When I got to look at it, I realized it's fake. The reason it looks so perfectly manicured is because it was AstroTurf or something. It's because they can't maintain grass out there. It's rock and gravel. And then when I actually went out and looked at the trees around the pool, the big palm trees, they were plastic. I was surprised. I realized that the same trees that were outside were also inside. And that's what made me look and went, "Oh, those aren't even real trees." Now, they were big and heavy because you couldn't move the pot, so they must have tools for that. But I still remember that I'm going, yeah, I think we have a little more diversity back home. It seemed to go to a strange place that recognize sort of a fake beauty instead of a real beauty. And maybe it's because the climate doesn't let them do that so well to have, but they want to have this facade. I guess casinos and resorts do that. They may keep everything perfect and beautiful so that you think it's better than around your house. And the fact I'm not having to cut it or maintain it, maybe that's better, but it's still, I didn't find it to be, well, let's just say it's good to be home. It's good to be home because there were other things that we'll talk about the trip that I found I was reminded of on the trip. Today our reading was from the last chapter of the Gospel of John. And we've spent some time on and off in that. And this is after the second appearance in the upper room, the one where Thomas is given the opportunity to see the wounds, and he doesn't really want to touch him like he thought he would. So this is a group of disciples, and all we know for sure is that 7 made this trip back up to Galilee area. And that's where John is focused. He's one of the 7. And as we recall from a couple of weeks ago, whenever he calls himself the one that Jesus loved, he's talking about himself. Maybe it sounds prideful, but I hope that all of us realize that we have we could say that very similar statement. It's really about the relationship that he and Jesus had, and the same that we're offered. So we don't know how much time has passed. We don't know. That last appearance could have been days, weeks. It might be. It could have been a month of Sabbaths by the time we get to this, because we don't know how long they have made the journey up. They know that they were instructed to make the trip back to some place that they were familiar with, and a lot of them were from right in that area. So it was like going home. And so there we have this group. They're waiting for Jesus to show up again. And we don't know how long it has been. We don't know, they don't know what to expect. We don't know. Well, I also wonder things like, where'd the rest of the followers go? It didn't say the whole group was in town. It doesn't tell us that these people were back home and they were telling people about Jesus. They're just back there, and we hear our normal impetuous Peter making a decision that he wasn't just going to sit around and wait anymore. We know that, well, they made this trip, and there's this long reflection, long enough that it's like they're bored. They're bored. They want to do something. They don't know exactly what it is. Here we have this one man that says, I know what I want to do. I'm going to go fishing. I hear men say that all the time. I'm not good at fishing. You could put them in a barrel and I'd have trouble catching them. So I don't really relate to saying that was what I was going to do. I mean, I'm sure there were things that I would pick. Some people say, I'm going to go golfing. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to take and go into the familiar things that I know, and I'm going to find something to kill the time. So, for some, maybe it's I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to watch sports. So in this case, Peter, being a professional fisherman, has said, well, I'm going fishing. Now, we don't know if it's maybe some, let's say, physical reasons. Maybe they're a little hungry. I'm not sure the purse that was the common purse that they paid expenses out of. We don't know that that's still in play. This is a smaller group. Maybe they divided up. So maybe they're hungry and they want to go, get a meal. Maybe they're going to go fishing, and he knows how to make a living fishing because he's done that before. Maybe it's like we're going to get some pocket money so we can pay expenses and do the things, while we're waiting on Jesus to return. There's I wonder if when they decided to go ahead and make the journey and wait on Jesus back up in the Galilean hillsides, do you think that they thought it was going to be like it was before? A walking tour of Israel where Jesus taught and he did healings and he confronted some political leaders, and somehow maybe the one thing they expected to be different is that they understood that when this Jesus was going to cause something new. It might be a revolution in a way. That's what they had expected. It didn't work the way they thought because things had changed dramatically since that Easter and then the resurrection, what we call the resurrection time for Easter. Were they looking for a season to continue? Because those days had been pretty good. Were they expecting to go around the countryside with Jesus again, and then he has failed to show up? They don't know if he's delayed on purpose. They don't have anything going on. But when the empty tomb had come, when everything had gone wrong, and they had a person that had turned him in that was of their own group. And then Peter, he had made a very public profession of, hey, no matter what happens, I will stand with you. I'll even die with you if necessary. And then we know that when he's confronted, he doesn't go forward with that. He denies Jesus 3 times. And now it's been some period of time. Days, weeks, months. And they're still waiting on the promised Holy Spirit, which Jesus is going to give them when he returns. And everything, I don't know, was it supposed to stop? Were they supposed to sit and wait patiently like school kids outside the principal's office? Probably not. Was the situation to make them feel like, that as they wait for Jesus, that they're just not supposed to do anything new? Everybody has bills to pay. People have things they need to do, but other people they need to take care of. And so sometimes we can't do what we would consider today a spiritual waiting for Jesus to guide our lives. Usually we're just having to respond to what we can do. And in this case, we have the disciples, after a period of ups and downs, well, they're now choosing something that's comfortable to do. They know how to fish. At least most of the ones mentioned here were in fishing families. They are going to make a choice to go back, at least part-time, to their old life. Because they're in a familiar place. They know how to fish and go to market. So they've made a choice. They're living in a time of, deprived gratification because Jesus hasn't shown up. That's what they're there for. And I get that. In their world, they probably have a lot more denied gratification than we do. We live in a pretty easy time where we can acquire things, and it's sometimes easier, but sometimes our gratification requirements go up and up and up. And so we can easily become dissatisfied with the things that we have, not realizing just how fortunate we are. Their biggest concern is, where's Jesus? When's he going to show up? When are we going to find out what's next? It's hard, especially hard for us to wonder, and sometimes even just a few hours of some tragedy in our lives, we probably wonder, where's Jesus? We may be crying out and wondering what's next, or how are we going to respond to this? It's easy to have the desires of our heart not to be anywhere close to satisfied when things are going on that, uncomfortable. So the disciples were expecting some kind of a revolution. Somehow the kingdom of God was coming, but they didn't know until Jesus would arrive. They didn't know when he would arrive and what he would say. They didn't know what to expect. And then, I don't know, what do we do when we're waiting on God or Jesus in our lives? Do we get busy to get distracted? Do we invest ourselves? Do we go back to some of our old ways? Sometimes our old ways aren't the good things in our life. Sometimes they are off track. I don't know, I did find it a little interesting that I didn't find any hint that these 7 disciples didn't seem to be going around the community where people knew them and where they would be most comfortable and talk about the things that had happened, both good and bad. Talk about the promises Jesus made about heaven. There's no hint of anything except that they are sitting there waiting for Jesus to show up. Do you think they felt a bit disqualified? Peter probably did especially. He'd done his denial thing. Others seem to have scattered. There's only one mentioned to be at the foot of the cross during the crucifixion, and that's the one that Jesus loved. All the other primary disciples were missing during most of that time. So Peter, not really being the patient kind of guy, says, I'm going to go fishing. And he plans a fishing trip, a night fishing trip, which, as I understand it, is the common thing. That you fish at night with torches out the side of the boat. You let the torches attract fish, and then you throw your nets in, and you try to scoop them up. And in this case, they're out there, as we understand from this story, or from this scripture, that they spend all night and don't catch anything. Peter's a professional. How could he not catch anything? He probably knew the fishing spots near where he was. How could it be that he would not have any luck? How could it be that this familiar activity was going to help him? I thought about it a little bit. I said, well, Peter knows about walking on the water, and so maybe he was thinking if Jesus comes and we're busy doing this, that he could just appear on the boat because he'd appeared in the upper room, or maybe he would walk across the lake to where they are. If he comes and it's time to have a meeting, he'll come to us. That's already what was supposed to be happening. So here we have Jesus not showing up, and they're having a bad night. They went to the most comfortable thing that they knew how to do. Make a little money, get a little dinner. Oh, was this the moment that Jesus was waiting for before he came? You see, they had to at least consider that maybe they needed Jesus for success. As they're doing this, there's this whole discussion about, this is not the first time they've had a bad night on the lake. The last time Jesus was there too. Is it that Jesus was waiting for the moment when they realized that both the ministry things they thought were going to develop was a bust, and now the thing they knew best back home didn't go well, and so they can be disappointed there too? Is this the moment that Jesus can say, now I can approach them, because they understand it's not as simple as being able to make your own success? The only way the disciples and Christians today and throughout history have an improving relationship with Jesus Christ is that we end up having to figure out how to serve Him seriously. When I say serve Him, we don't do things for Him, we do things in His name. We do things that sometimes we enjoy completely because we happen to be gifted for it. Sometimes we do things that we don't feel so comfortable with. And sometimes we think that Jesus says you have to do these things for a relationship with me, but that is not really where I think the important factor is here, is that we are invited to participate and that we understand that maybe we can't do some of the successes that we're looking for, but Jesus says that He will do them, and He'll do them abundantly. They're coming back in the early morning. Maybe it's pre-dawn, and this man hollers from the shore, "Did y'all catch anything?" And their answer is no. Now, when I see that short no, I talk to a lot of fishermen when they come in, and if they even have one, they're going to tell you about the big fight. They're going to tell you how many they got, what kind they are, and they're speaking a foreign language to me, because unless I'm with somebody catching fish, I don't know what that's like. It's only a few times in my life have I hooked up something. And so in this case, their answer is so short, I'm thinking, no, and we don't want to talk about it. Because fishing is hard. You're going out and you're in the lake and you're putting the nets in and you're pulling them out, and you're putting them in and pulling them out, and you're doing this all night, and they're probably working in shifts of who's letting it out and then who's pulling it in. For them to have even success in fishing that would be substantial to them is going to end up requiring Jesus' involvement. This stranger on the shore says, well, put your nets out on the right side of the boat. Now, being their professional fishermen, I think the first thing that probably comes to their mind is that's not the right name for the right side of the boat. If you know anything about boats, you got to say starboard, right? I don't know what they called it, but I imagine they had a special name. It's so that you wouldn't, which side is which, because when you turn around on the boat, it reverses. So there was probably a proper name of being the right side and the left side. Maybe they just kept it simple and did that. But maybe they remembered that other time when there was this carpenter giving advice. It worked out, didn't it? This carpenter said, "Hey, put out your nets for a big catch," and it was a big catch, and it was amazing. They'd already sort of tried to resist it, and this time all they did was go ahead, and when the suggestion was made, they dropped the nets in, and then when they pulled it in, there was this massive number of fish, large fish. And I don't think the number matters so much, except that if you talk to a fisherman, you always know how many they caught. So somebody recorded this, John recorded this, and so there are other theories on that, but I really don't find that there's anything that says anything except for the record that it was a big catch. John tells Peter, it's the Lord. That fella over there, 100 yards away in the semi-darkness, that's Jesus. And Peter doesn't really hesitate. He throws on his outer garment because he's sort of been working in his undies, because it's a guy thing and you're fishing and no big deal. But he puts on his clothes and he jumps into the water and he's swimming ashore. And I don't know, if I'd been the other people on the boat, I might have been upset that I had to get the boat into shore myself and trying to deal with the nets. And there were enough of them. The story picks up when they're all together again, and they say they see this man, and they know it's the Lord, but they're afraid to say, "Are you the Lord? Are you Jesus?" They knew it, but they didn't really recognize him. And I studied on that. I found one commentator that gave a description that I found to be just useful to me. It may not be accurate, but he described the change between Jesus' earthly body and his new body as being equivalent to a seed or sprout that is later turned into the flowering plant. So that they could recognize him. They knew him from his power. They knew him from maybe even his voice, but they didn't quite recognize the physical form, but it wasn't so distant or foreign that they didn't consider it at all. We're told our heavenly bodies will be the same but different. That we'll recognize each other. I don't know, the frustration of the fishing trip turns into not just a celebration that there's a big catch, but that Jesus has arrived on the scene. They now feel, they feel like that little promise has come true, and things are going to change. And I think about this as Christians. How is it that we can say things about Jesus and our salvation? We say, "Hey, Jesus saved me. I'm great with that." We talk about the changes in our earthly journey and making better choices. We might even say things like Paul said, which is, "I can do all things through Christ." All these things are things we say, but are they really things that we do? We say a lot of things, and hopefully we say things in positive ways. Hopefully it's not just at church. Hopefully there are other places we might say some of those things. But is it what we do? Do we trust Christ? Or do we start doing things that are more Christ-like, but we don't depend on Christ? So, I can take care of this task. I'll invite this person to church. Maybe that's a positive thing, but if you haven't involved Christ in it, if you just start doing some things, those aren't bad things. It's just it may not be as powerful as if we have involved asking Jesus to guide us and to give us the words and make choices. I know it's a mistake to think that we can make just choices of the things to do and think that God will bless what we have chosen to do. Because that's sometimes the way we do it. In fact, maybe that's more often than not. Now, sometimes we look at the things that we can't do, or we've always felt like we couldn't do, and we feel maybe inadequate. That's what I think is the most common thing, is we don't feel qualified sometimes. And so I wondered, if we feel inadequate, I decided it's a dangerous position to be in, because it means that we don't trust Jesus enough, and we sit around looking for things to do, quiet and comfortable, out of the way. We don't want to be any trouble to anybody, and so maybe we do a few things that might qualify as being a blessing. Maybe we keep people on our prayer list, and that is a valuable and comforting thing. In fact, sometimes that's all we really do, is we try to include our prayer list from the bulletin or things we know. But does it really require Jesus to make a difference in that situation? That's why the only way success comes. I don't know, is it that we feel disqualified because of some of our life choices? I was thinking of Moses. He had some excuses when the burning bush was giving him instructions, and he says, I can't speak right, and he had all kinds of things. He'd even murdered a guy, and he didn't really get out of his call. God had selected him to do certain things, and so he was supposed to go do this, leading the people out of Egypt. Man, that was a big thing. And I realized that in my call experience, I realized that I had excuses that I tried, and I sort of held off doing things for years. And every now and then God would just come back again, and these little feelings would come, and then try to asking me to make choices, or new opportunities came up, and particularly this particular church that says, "Hey, we want somebody to do this or that. We need a chairman of finance." Yeah, that was a great job, right, Rita? Yeah, okay. So there are things that just sort of popped up, and I realized that you can't resist those. You can say no for a while. All I did was disqualify myself after being invited, and then I went, and I eventually did go get education, but I'd already decided yes was something I had to say. You see, you really don't get to just say no. Now, God won't make you do it. He won't take you and treat you like a ventriloquist dummy and make you say things. He'll let you live on the fringes, but you really won't enjoy a lot of the grace that can flow through you if you don't embrace the fact that it's not your ability, not your skills that make the difference. It is your relationship through Jesus with God. So I guess I'll go ahead and confess a little more. Even this Sunday, every Sunday I have ever gone out to preach, and some of them were done in this church before we went away, I always feel inadequate to be the one delivering the message. Now, at the same time, I understand that I'm called, and I give my time, I give my prayers, I ask God for guidance. I even feel inadequate in offering my prayers. Y'all hear them every week, and you probably realize when I went to the training before I suddenly went away to be a minister, there was this training. We had a lay speakers class. It was right here in this church, so it was really convenient. It was right after church, like 4 Sunday afternoons or 4 Saturdays, I don't remember. That's not a lot of training to suddenly go be a minister, especially if you don't even have a college degree. But I went to those classes, and the last one, everybody is given their little 5-minute sermonette, okay, a little devotional is what it was. So they had talked to you about, expanding your voice and speaking big, and the different things, the things that they try to teach you a little bit about public speaking and how to read the scripture and try to formulate that. And that's the only training I really had before I was suddenly at a church, 2 churches, and I didn't feel prepared to be there. I could have said no, but I never would have experienced the blessing of watching God deliver and heal and pour out grace in people's lives. My prayers still remain simple. When I was in that class, and they would have different people pray in different sections, and you had the subgroups, and some people they would pray, and it was just beautiful, and big language, and grand language. And my prayers have always been, hey, God, hey, would you notice, we're here, and we've got this on our hearts, and I was told that was okay. It's okay to just offer what you can do to God, because it is not me who's doing anything except allowing God to speak words, and sometimes just the tone changes people's lives. Sometimes you're at the hospital and the story is really bad, and you show up in the room and there's no idea. I would have an idea what to say, but all I can do is I usually, the very first time was really horrible. Didn't know the lady. She wasn't even a member of the church. She was a member of family of the church. And God said, you're going to go. And so when I got there, I backed up to the wall over at Redmond, and I'm looking at the door, number beside the door, and I'm saying, Lord, I don't know what to do. I've never gone to the bedside of a dying person. Eventually he said, go. Just get in there. Get in there. And then my trembling voice became words of comfort. Not because I knew how to do it. It was because God was doing it through me. Because I cared enough to offer what I had to God to use, I got to witness not just the ill person receiving blessing and grace, but the family. Not my power. Not my abilities. All it was my offering to God to say, I'll come. Like our song that will. Here I am, Lord. That's all I can do. And I can tell you, that's all any of us can do. You can have talents and you can have spiritual gifts. And as long as you will give them to God, they will become powerful, not for you, but for God. And that's the most amazing thing. Because I know I'm not really qualified. But I have been chosen. You are chosen. Maybe not to be the pastor, but you are chosen. You are chosen to do something. You are chosen to listen to that stranger's voice that says, put your nuts out on the other side or the right side. And all you do is you go and you open your mouth and you say something. I don't know, reading this interaction, the disciples could have just said, we're not going to listen to that guy. We're exhausted, and not put their nets out. But we don't even hear this time that they made a choice not to respond to what this stranger on the beach said. Maybe it was maybe something like this happened about 3 years ago. Oh, yeah, let's just do it. I don't want to get in an argument. But they could have not even cared enough to give it a try. And they would have missed this abundant blessing from God. This announcement that he was present with them right then. I guess they had that choice. They could either switch sides of the boat, move the net 7-8 feet. Okay, we were fishing this side of the boat. Now we're going to throw it, let me reverse that. This side of the boat, and now we're going to throw it on that side. What difference is that going to make? We always have a choice of whether we're going to respond to a nudge or not. The choir knows, and probably some of you know, that Renee and I kept sneaking back to participate with the choir for a long time until we were back to participate with the choir. And there was one time, and it was a long time back, I was serving elsewhere, but we were invited back, and I guess we were taking an Easter cantata or a cantata to another church on the other side of town. And we were doing a rehearsal in their sanctuary, and at the end, we're sitting there because, see, I still am shy about sharing my faith. Now, I share what I do with people all the time. I'm asked to pray at all kinds of public functions because I share that I'm a pastor. But I have trouble sometimes when somebody says, oh man, if they seem to be open to receiving Christ, sometimes I don't know that I feel like I can respond. But on this particular time, it wasn't receiving Christ, but someone expressed, I got this problem, and I hope you all will pray for me. And a lot of people said, and I probably said it too, yeah, we'll pray for you. And that's when another one of these things, not really an audible voice, is like, stop. I didn't even get 4 or 5 feet away. It says, go pray now. I don't know if it made a difference to them. I don't know what I said, except for, I think we should pray now. And we did. I don't know what came out of my mouth, but I hope it was a blessing. It's not what I know how to do that matters. It is my presence and yielding what I have to offer to God that makes a difference. Jesus has this thing about being really abundant. Back when we studied a few months ago, the wedding in Cana, what makes 100 gallons of wine? The best wine? Boom, it's abundant. He didn't give them just 2 little wine vessels, or anything. No, when he came and then he said, yes, okay, here, I'm going to do this. And he takes the water jars, boom, abundance. And then they had that lunch on the side of the hill. There's thousands of people up on the hill. And he tells his disciples, hey, let's feed these people. Go do something. And all you bring back is this kid's lunch. And it turns into 12 baskets of leftovers. Abundance. In our story today, a night of empty fishing turned into an abundant catch. As a disciple, as a child of the King. If we want to see lives changed, and including ours, then we have to expect an abundance by making an offering. See, he didn't tell them, stand back, y'all watch this, and make the fish jump into the boat. He made them drop their nets at least one more time, and then to try to pull them in. He asked us to spread our nets just the way we know how. Maybe it's some things we're totally comfortable in. Maybe it's people we talk to at Walmart or somebody that's a friend. And all we do is they say, man, I'm really having a hard time. You say, well, can I pray with you? And don't mean just tonight when I go to bed pray with you where you may or may not remember it. But you say, hey, you mind if I pray with you right now? And it's you and a friend. Come on, how hard can it really be? Yeah, I know there's a little fear. How hard is it for you to invest a few minutes of your time to allow God to speak through you to that person? You care. God cares too. Sometimes we think that these things that we're asked to do, like giving, submitting to God, doing these things, we feel like they're a burden. But I think what happens in this scripture tells us a little bit about it is we forget what God is doing for us and has done for us. The biggest thing that helps us remember that is when they get on shore, Jesus has got bread and fish on the grill, and he feeds them. Now, we know he's the host, and that's what we'll celebrate in just a minute. We know he's the host at many events. He's the host for the Passover feast. And I'm sure whenever they broke bread together on these journeys through Israel, he was technically the host. They would gather, and even when he was in somebody else's house, he acted as the one who lifted the blessing to God. The way we experience that remembrance of outpouring of grace is from our remembrance of the things he's doing and done for us. And as we start to give and say, here, God, what my time is yours. Here, God, my resources are yours. Here, God, my investment in some other person is all only successful from you. That's when we notice who it is that's really blessing us. It changes us. It empowers us. Not an arrogant kind of an empowerment. It's a kind of empowerment that says, maybe you can hear God in me just by offering. Can I pray with you? Now, you may still want to say, well, right now I'm still a little meek and a little mild, and I'm going to pray, but I'm going to add the school that's near the house. I'm going to pray that God will bless that school and protect that school. That's an investment, and the more you do that, the more maybe you will feel comfortable with being able to offer that. But include God in that decision, not just simply God bless. Maybe it means that you're being called to go down to that school and be a tutor, helping kids with their homework. That's when you're giving yourself and your time. It's not in the strange things that you might do or the hard things that you may do. It starts with the simple giving of yourself to Christ in remembrance of what he's already done for you. So, I guess the question comes down to, what are you going to do? As we start our time of Holy Communion, I hope that will be what's on your heart, is that you'll say, okay, Lord, that sort of sparked my attention. What am I missing? Or in my case, what have I been resisting? I resisted a long time before I found the blessing. All right, we're going to transition to our time of Holy Communion.